Joseph Bates, great to have you on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
I just want to quickly introduce you because I think it's really important to frame for the listeners. Joe, you were a sniper in the UK Special Forces.
For my sins.
You lost your father when you were 17 to a very rare form of Alzheimer's. And this turned your life upside down and sent you on a journey of self-discovery. You've been a butcher, a banker, a brander, we'll come on to that later, and a soldier, and now run a very unique mental health platform called Halen. And I think it's so interesting, this, because this sort of story arc that you've gone on, it's very common, right? The arc is common. You know, so many people used to live their life in a certain way. You know, it was intense, it was automatic, it was controlled. And then something happens, some moments, a catalyst, and that sparks a process of self-awareness and self-discovery, which ends up transforming your life and the world around you. But what makes this so beautiful is that everyone's story is obviously so individual and different, and that's what makes it all unique and interesting. And, you know, I can't wait to hear your story. So, you know, tell me, 17 years old, in the Special Forces, you know, how did that even happen?
Yeah, it's mad, isn't it? Life is mad and the world is mad. And I think it's only getting more crazy. But I look back and, you know, it feels like a lifetime ago. But to go back, so I grew up in Devon. My mum was kind of head in charge of educational psychology in the UK. So we'd always sit around the table and I'd try and have intellectual conversations, you know, try and pretend like some young whippersnapper. And my dad was heavily involved in the arts sector, so government funding, heavily involved when Camelot first launched, the lottery side of things.
I remember.
He did a lot of that. Super happy family. I was the youngest, little tyrant. My brother was at Durham University studying ancient history and archaeology. He had the brains. And my sister was also at uni. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I was very sporty. I love photography, which is weird when you think about lenses and sniping and apertures. Well, maybe that's where it came from, actually. Well, I was quite good at taking the perfect shot, pardon the pun. And Dad suddenly, from being, you know, growing up from this loving, beautiful, it was always sunny, right? When you look back on your childhood, mine always felt sunny. Devon, rolling hills, outdoors all the time. And Dad suddenly started acting odd and weird. And I remember Mum saying, we got to take him up to London for some tests. And it's all a bit of a blur, isn't it? Anyone that goes through trauma, your brain naturally blanks a lot of it. You know, I look back to this period in my life and I have to kind of fill in the gaps of what was going on with it. But it turns out that Dad developed something called Pick's disease, which is the most severe form of Alzheimer's. So very quickly, he started just to kind of degrade mentally, and he started to act very oddly. And Mum couldn't look after him in the house, so he went into a mental institute. There's no nice way of saying that, but you know what I mean. And out of this whole period of that life when my dad was really poorly, and again, I just kind of like cracked on. You know, I was 17, A levels, floating through, not really doing much, but just being a usual lad at 17 years old, you know, having fun, basically. I remember Mum saying, you've got to come and see him. You know, you have to come and see him now. It's time, you know, because he won't be around for very long. And I pulled up and I remember being so nervous. Like, out of all the memories of what I've done hostage rescues, that is by far the most nerve-wracking thing I have ever done in my life, because I hadn't seen him for months. And I walked into this institute, whatever you want to frame it, asylum. You know, these poor people are very sick, including my dad. And it was literally like my memory, and you never quite know, how your memory tweaks things, if that makes sense, yeah? But how I remember it was people walking around in robes. This guy came up to me and clapped in my face, highly medicated, poorly ill people. And I saw Dad, and I probably lasted like a minute, and I just ran out crying. And at like 17, when you're 17 years old, you think you're a man, don't you? And I remember just being so unstable. So we lost him. He passed away quite quickly after that. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to go or what to study. I felt like it all kind of, I just felt, without sounding cliche, I felt numb. I just felt very, very numb to everything. And all I wanted to do was get away and not have to think and almost like self-mutilate. Like I just wanted to get hammered. So I remember...
But at that time, you were very much linking the way that you were feeling with the passing of your father.
I know. I don't know. I don't think so. No, 100% wasn't.
So in retrospectively, you can look at it now. But at the time, you were just dealing with your own automatic emotion. You were being reactionary.
Yeah, exactly. And I just didn't know what to do. I think I'd lost, one of the most important people in your life. She's your dad, right? I was the youngest son. We had a really, really strong bond. And someone in my close family kind of said that I should look at. I look classic. I think I walked into the careers office. And I think I had watched Top Gun semi recently in my teens, and I was like, I want to be a fast jet pilot. I want to be Maverick, which is actually quite poignant now, isn't it, for the re-release, I suppose. And I failed. I am like the worst person at maths. My English is pretty good, and the rest of my academics is pretty good, but my maths is woeful, like terrible. And I think he asked me, like, roughly, this guy in the military recruitment office, how my maths was. And he's like, listen, I'm not even going to put you anywhere near the fast jet course. But he was like, have you heard of the Royal Marines? They're just down the road. I go up on Dartmoor. And I was like, no. And he showed me, and I think he introed them by being they are the toughest force to join. He's obviously an ex-Royal. He's a Royal Marine who's telling me this. So again, in retrospect, it makes sense, right? Yeah, exactly.
He was promoting his own
thing, yeah. And but they, the Royal Marine Commandos, serious reputation. Churchill founded them as the Commandos. Royal Marines were in 1664, but then they became the Commandos in the Second World War. And that was it. I signed up. I went down the aptitude course and spent. Devon is a Dartmoor. It's where they train, so I couldn't be in a better place to learn how to become a Royal Marine before joining the Marines.
On a doorstep, right?
Oh my God, yeah. And I just loved the goal. I loved focusing on something that was really hard to get into. So did that, passed Lympston. It's kind of weird being literally in your garden, getting hammered and not being able to go home. Like I knew these places, they would throw us in the water up on Dartmoor and make you stand in there, like gibbering, freezing at night. Like I used to swim in that in the summer, like with my friends. So, but trust me, it wasn't.
That's very odd, isn't it?
It is weird. It is weird, but actually they can make it a lot worse. So they ruined every memory I had of Dartmoor, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I passed. I got the top recruit in training. I passed as a marksman. I was a section commander, so I did pretty well in training. I got the King's Badge, which is a kind of cipher that only the best recruits can wear. Blah 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 blah. Let's not big myself up. But I think, why did I do so well? And only my granddad was in the military. Like he served in the artillery as a spotter. But the rest of my family have never been military. It's not like I went to recruit. I was in the cadets or anything. And in my experience, a lot of the guys that go into these training things that have done too much, as in they are die hard, they've always wanted to do it. A lot of the ones that fail, right? So if I look back to my basic training, it was your kind of oddballs, like your rough scouser from Liverpool who would join, who would actually smash it out the ballpark. Not some of these guys that wanted to be super army soldiers from like.
Why do you think that was?
I'm not painting everyone with that same brush, if that makes sense, because we all know that there are situations where this doesn't work. But a couple of the guys that I have worked with in the past that failed courses that I've been on, whether that was like the Royal Marines training, I think they like the idea of being a soldier from a very young age, right? But then when they're actually getting ragged, on Dartmoor in the howling rain at nighttime, it's a very different story. I didn't find it easy, of course. It's a very hard course. But I think the purpose of why I was there and the catalyst of Dad dying, nothing could really hurt me. And I'm not saying I wouldn't, I was very sociable, I was chatty. But I was just very numb. So nothing could really get me. Yeah, and it's kind of interesting. And it's to kind of go back to that point. So passed from the Royal Marines, went straight on my sniper's course, went straight to Iraq, served in Basra and Baghdad as a sniper with 40 Commando, and came back from that. And I wanted to straight away go for Special Forces selection. And I was 19 years old. And I walked into my Sergeant Major's office and said, I want to go on Special Forces selection. He said, don't even think about it. You're too young. You'll be back here within...
How old were you at that time?
19. Wow. 19, yeah. 19. I couldn't really grow a beard. Just about grow a beard. And... But I felt right. I felt like I wanted to go for my body felt good. My head felt good. You know, I just wanted to go for it. And I saw this picture of this diver coming out of the water, and it was on the aptitude course in the Royal Marines selection. And it was this diver coming out of the water with, you know, a DeMarco, which is a Canadian M4, with the full rebreather set on, like half at night time. And I was like, that shit is cool. I was like,
I thought you were about to say
it's
that.
fucking cool. Like, part of my French, it's very, very cool. I want to do that. Like, that's it. And so put my name in, went on the aptitude, passed that, and then went on selection at 19 and passed at 20, which was a gnarly ride, right? The Special Forces selection, UK SF selection is definitely up there with the best in the world. In terms of the way they test you, you know, I think roughly 300 to 400 people start on the first day, and you roughly get between 4. I mean, the SES might get 4, we might get 5, the SBS. So the process works, put it that way.
Wow. How long does that process take?
So 6 months of... So we all do it together, whether you're going for SAS or SBS, it's all the same thing. You start in Wales on the Brecons, which is the mass cull. So they get the numbers down by ragging you on the hills, you know. And then they take you to the jungle, and they put you in the jungle on a canopy, fully tactical for 30 days. And you lose, like, you know, you come out with nothing on you. You just ribs. I mean, your feet are literally like eating themselves alive. And trust me, that last shower at the end of jungle selection is horrendous. Well, it's amazing horrendous. And then you down to probably about 30 go into the trees, go into the jungle, about 30. And then you go into escape and evasion, which is the interrogation training. And that's where the SES go their way and do their specialist stuff. And we go our way and do our diving and our boats course. But it's about 7 to 8 months of training.
Got it.
Yep, roughly.
Did you find the physical stuff or the mental stuff easier? Or was it all just the same for you there? You didn't think, I'm better at this stuff than others, or it was all just in one of the same?
I think it's all connected, right? It's absolutely connected. I think there are certain things that in SF selection is famous for doing, and I think you can take massive draws from this in anything you do in life, if that makes sense. One thing is when someone's hammering you and beasting you and they don't tell you where the finishing line is, like that wrecks your head, right? So like when it's like things like pays to be a winner, which is where they'll line up all of you and there'll be a tree a mile away up on the hillside, and the first guy to get to the tree and back stands out, it doesn't go again. So when there's like 100 of you, you have all these weird tactics. You might not be the fastest runner. So you're trying to like figure out where you should race in that race, because you might be going 100 times. So you literally could be doing like, you know, sets 500 meters away. You might be doing like 50K, whatever. So there's a lot of like pardon my French again, head fuck strategies they do. The other thing is that at any point you can put your hand up and quit. In the normal military, you can't do that. You can do it up to a certain stage, but when you sign that letter to the Queen, now the King, you can't just say I'm out. It doesn't work like that. But in SF selection, the minute you see, and it happens daily on selection, someone to the left of you put their hand up and go, I'm done. They get a warm blanket around them. The DS are really nice. The no worries, mate. Again, you know, you did good.
They try and encourage you.
Yeah, and you know, they try. Yeah, exactly. So it's all these kind of interesting mind games they play. I think I've known epically strong people go on selection that have passed because you get 3 attempts. I've known 2 very good friends that failed the first time just because their head wasn't straight. Their head wasn't straight. It might have been stuff to do with like family life at home. Exactly the same guy, same soldier, same skills, same fitness. But when it's raining at night in the trees and you're freezing cold, people think jungle's really hot. But when you start to acclimatize and you've got nothing on your body, you know, I lost 2 stone. I think I lost nearly 2 stone. I went down to like 12, just under 12 stone. You know, wow. I'm 14 and a half now. There's nothing on you because you're burning 8,000 calories and the ration pack's like 2.5. So when you're at nighttime and it's 25 days in, and it's
If
just,
there's a little chink there,
it's, you just got to go.
everything
Yeah.
gets magnified,
Yeah,
basically,
everything, yeah.
psychologically. Yeah.
Everything. Yeah. So you need to be, it's about your nest, right? I always talk about this. Like any of my friends that have suffered from PTSD from operations, it's absolutely because things weren't right at home. If and this is just an all-round great metaphor, isn't it?
Across the board.
Across everything.
Yeah.
You need strong foundations, right? You need strong foundations for life. If you don't have your home, your nest, your bed good, if that makes sense, you're gonna, when you get hit, you're gonna wobble. Right?
It's so true. You hear about it so often in professional elite sports teams as well. When people aren't performing, it's like, things aren't right at home.
Yeah.
So a lot of the time, there's a connection there. Okay, so what happens next, Joe?
So left SF, although kind of finished on a real highlight. So my last tour, first day in, a New York Times reporter had been kidnapped. And you spend your life in SF, really. It's all around, it's about all sorts of operations, but hostage rescues are kind of up there with the World Cup stuff. It's the kind of gnarly stuff. At the end of the day, there's a tangible good outcome that you can get out, if that makes sense, versus...
Quite specific.
It's very specific. You get the real kick from rescuing, of course. So we flew in and got him out, and it was a gnarly job. So that was my last tour. So that was the kind of
highlight. Where was
that? Northern Afghan.
Are you allowed to talk about it?
It's in the press. It's a New York Times reporter, a guy called Stephen Farrell. We lost a guy on it. His interpreter got shot through crossfire, Taliban. But it was crazy. I mean, if you read about it, and there's lots online about it. I mean, we fired a lot of rounds.
How many people in your team?
So we had 4-man teams.
And why was it SBS rather than SAS on that particular?
Or Americans, right? Because he was New York Times.
Or Americans.
We were in the area. We were more positioned for it. The SAS, I don't even know if they were in country at that point. I think they might have been still in Iraq. So we just flipped.
It was a convenience thing.
Yeah, exactly. A good convenience. Right?
Good convenience, yeah.
Convenience thing. Conveniently, we were there. But no, that was probably the highlight. So then left, bodyguarded for like a lot of our guys. Less so.
Sorry, you left the Special Forces.
Left Special Forces. I left at like 25. I had a long time left to push. Like, because I badged so young, as in past SF so young. My pension was 15 years away, more. So I had a lot of operations to go. And I think because the reason I went down that route, because of Dad, like I said, I wasn't like a cadet. I wasn't mad into it. I was just on the rush of skill training. I felt like I wanted to go and experience the world. So left that, bodyguarded an American, very rich chap, which was interesting. Going and kind of traveling around the world and seeing that life. Yeah, going from what I had done to suddenly working on a super yacht. Well, not working, bodyguarding on a super yacht where, someone loses their phone, for instance, and you open up like a cupboard and it's like a Mac store. There's just like...
ridiculous.
It's just ridiculous. Well, it's amazing because it was all self-made, but eye-opener. And he made a lot of his money on Wall Street. So I was like, I want to own a yacht. I want to own a Learjet. So I took my FSA exams, my trading exams, moved back to London, living in Battersea, knocked on the door of all the banks, Goldman's. I don't think Goldman's even got back to me. Credit Suisse had an interview, weren't interested. And Citibank basically said, we like your style. Like, what are you doing? But we'll give you a go. If you pass the grad scheme, you're in. And don't forget about my maths situation, right? So like, talk about having to work hard. So studied my ass off and got on the grad scheme and passed it. And that was it. Became a trader in London for about 2 years in Citibank, getting the night bus. I was getting the night bus across Battersea Bridge to the first tube. It's Sloane Square, right? And back to our chat before we started this podcast about winter months in London when it was rain at that time in the morning. And you just, oh my God, that was grim. No mental resilience can keep you on that. I don't care who you are. Like that's
you. Those are the moments where you really ask yourself, what am I doing?
What am I doing?
Do I really need this?
Yeah, do I really need it? And I would sit there. And by the way, absolutely, if any of the guys that are involved in that period of my life, in terms of the banking side of things, like, they're amazing. They bent the rules. They gave me a go, and I respect them so much for that. But it wasn't for me. So I would sit there and I would hear, I was on like a multi kind of product trading desk, and I'd hear like the hedge fund traders come in behind me, and this is a Monday morning, right? And I'd literally be like trying to wake up, even though my training, but we're going from what I'd done to that rat race, the Jubilee line into Canary Wharf and coffee. It just all felt very weird. TM Lewin shirts, the usual score. And hearing these guys come in and so excited about stock. They were like literally buzzing. And they were like, yeah, I was reading it on the weekend. And I was just like, I'm not those guys.
It wasn't stimulating you.
It wasn't me. And there's a massive amount of, stress people put themselves into from trying to force things they're not into, whether that's jobs, whether that's sports, whether that's relationships. I had someone talk recently about like willpower, and how I think, oh no, it's not willpower, it's something else, but how people in things like bad relationships, they'll keep trying to make things work sometimes. And sometimes you just need to know, right?
It's not right.
It's not right. And you need to just go, and that's kind of what I did. Well, that is what I did with the banking. I basically completely burnt out. Wasn't sleeping, which was zombified. I was at a wedding, one of my brother's friends. And my brother, very, very closely, came up to me. And he was like, dude, are you all right? He was like, I was just chatting to Kirsty, a friend of ours. And she said, like, you just lost your spark. And when something really hits you, it really got me. I was like, what do you mean I've lost my spark? She was like, I don't know. She just said, you just a bit lost your spark. And I think, is that not a great way to make a guy probably like sit up a bit? Yeah. Someone that thinks they're aspirational and someone that thinks they're progressive and wants to be the best. It really got me that in a good way. So I was like, no, you're right. Bugger this. And I wasn't looking after myself, usual shit, right? Drinking far too much, dabbling in other things. And I think because of my training and because the level of fitness and even mental resilience and aptitude, it actually can be quite dangerous because you can really push yourself even when you're not right.
When it's not working.
When it's not working, yeah. And 100%. I think that's what happened. I I wasn't eating. I'd get up, I'd have a whole cafetiere of coffee, I'd have a cigarette, a whole cafetiere of coffee. I'd go to the gym. I'd do like an hour of fartlecking on a tread.
You'd force it. You'd force the whole thing.
And I was just gassed, but I still operate, but just gassed. So quit that. Didn't tell anyone about it because this is, 12 years ago. And you've got to think how much the mental health conversation's gone up. Went to Harley Street, tried to speak to someone, didn't really get it. Felt very lonely because I still want to tell anyone. I think I told my brother maybe.
Did you self-diagnose almost? Like, hang on, I don't feel right. I'm going to go to Harley Street. Or did you speak to someone and they thought,
I spoke to someone.
I think
I spoke to someone, yeah. I spoke to my manager, my line manager in City, because I was like, I'm just not feeling right. I think I also massively messed up a trade. And I was just like, sleep. I got the trade the wrong way round. So I should have, and it was a big. It was a biggie. And it was junior. It was a Friday afternoon. I'll never forget this day. Friday afternoon, everyone was like getting their jackets. So we'll meet downstairs for beers and drinks, right? And I was reporting back. I was phoning back the accounts and reporting back what we'd done. And I spoke to this one rather large account. And I was like, you bought X? And they were like, sorry, say that again. And I was like, you bought 1,300 shares of X? And they said, do you mean sell? And I just went, oh my God. Like global head of trading had to come over, listen to the voice record back. And it was just like, again, like a very tangible, a bit like the you've lost your spark. Like I messed up big there.
Hits you.
Yeah, I messed up really big. And why? Because I wasn't right. Like I was knackered. I was just not on form, So went to Harley Street, didn't really connect with it. Came home and tried an online therapy company that I had just heard about. I think I even just searched online therapy. went through the triage process, answered a few questions, and I was like, this is fucking depressing. Like, it was super clinical. It was like, are you depressed? I was like, I don't know if I'm depressed. I'm like genuinely depressed now because it's making me feel like I've got shit wrong with me. Like, I don't know. If someone just said, you need to quit your job, right? It's very simple. Quit your job, stop drinking, look after yourself. Like, happy days, job done. But I was solo at this point. I didn't know what to do. So tried this therapy platform, got through to this therapist, and I'm not knocking her for this or even necessarily the platform. But she was in like Dallas and she had like a Bronco picture behind her. So like, again, like the kind of algorithm matching me, this like Devon born sniper with this therapist in Dallas who has like literally like Western style. It was just so, you couldn't get it more wrong.
Yeah, different cultures.
Just totally different. So I was just like, okay, Ben, red, let's go. Wanted to get away from all of it again. There's a bit of a pattern here, right? Run. And a friend of mine was in Dubai, and he knew a very good friend that had this big branding agency. And I always found consumer products interesting. I think, I always found why different brands do different things, how you can position water differently. Remember when Voss came out, they went super sciencey. Remember that? And
yeah, I do actually. It's almost the human psychology piece to it.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest, right? It's water. So I always found that stuff interesting. Moved to Dubai and worked, this was 10 years ago, worked very cross-sector out there, lots of kind of luxury stuff, lots of some automotive airline stuff. And then moved to Hong Kong and opened up an office for the agency there for him, which was really cool. This was pre-Hong Kong, like going mad and not being an overly great place to live and there being a massive migration back here. Built an agency for this amazingly talented chap called John Brash, and then open up an agency for them in Australia. So lived in Sydney. And again, the work-life balance, like really interesting.
That was working for you. It sort of felt like you sort of hit your flow a little bit. You got into this marketing, the branding side of things, a bit more creative.
Yeah, super creative.
A bit more aligned with what you were enjoying.
Yeah, exactly. And just working with lots of people and having lots of conversations, whether it's founders or slightly white-haired execs, and just, it's psychology, right? Branding is psychology. It's getting into the heads of these people. And working cross-sector and I did quite a bit in China and just seeing how different cultures pump. Like the Aussie market is so, stereotypes are there for a reason. They genuinely are true, right? They are. Aussies are Aussies, right? They love a drink and they like to clock off and go down the beach and they love a barbie. It's true. It's totally true. So I always found it fascinating working with these different places, but the work-life balance thing, coming back to mental health and burnout, and the Aussies have got it very good. They really, really have got it good. I mean, partly helped by how beautiful places like Sydney are. But, I'd wake up. Go on.
No, it's the weather, it's the outdoors, it's the sport.
Minus the sharks.
Culture.
But then it's quite cool that things want to try and kill you as well. It's quite funny,
Bit
right?
of danger.
Bit of danger.
Yeah.
I'd wake up, I'd run along Bondi, and I'd sea swim inside the shark nets, walk back, like shower on the beach, have a coffee, because everyone just walks like from the beach back to their houses. You just walk around, right? Because of the weather. Shower, into work your ass off, come back at like 4, sundowners and chill and gym, and it's just, anyway, weather.
It's hard not to feel good in that environment.
Weather. Anyway, came back from Australia, back to London, and by this point I'd worked really cross-sector. I'd worked with some tiny startups right up to, like Emirates level corporates. And I was like, I want to try and do something myself. I want to try and launch something. And I felt like I'd learned a lot, right? And I had the drive and I loved the creative thing, but you need to find what to do. It's all well and good. Unless you're like Elon Musk and you can kind of like literally reinvent like space travel, and that he has a nice pocket, bank for that. But I looked at the mental health space, and this is pre-awareness, really. This is pre-pandemic. This is pre-COVID, and nothing had really changed. Like the platforms still looked the same. The ones I tried, there was a bit more talk about it, a little bit, but it was still a little bit embarrassing when sportsmen were talking about it.
At this point, when you were considering doing something in mental health, had you worked through your own stuff?
Yeah.
by this time.
Yeah. I mean,
Started
I work through, I think you're always, and I think this is something that I'm a big advocate of, you're always working through it. Like, I don't think you ever work through, I don't think you ever stop working on yourself, if that makes sense.
Sure, that makes total sense. But but do you remember when you went to see the therapist in Harley Street and you went to the online stuff and none of that was really working? So what then did lead you to starting to understand your own mind better?
I think, so number one, looking after myself, just like moderation. Like some people say moderation doesn't work. Like everyone's wired differently, if that makes sense. I've tried to go down like the complete like monk, like, you know, no drinking, like stupid amounts of sleep, if that makes sense, like trying to close myself off. And my energy's not right for that. Like I love conversation. And so I think there is no blueprint in the way everyone's wired. I think everyone just needs to find how best to tune themselves a bit. And that's an ongoing process because the world's changing.
Yeah, makes total sense. I mean, that's something we're a big advocate on the podcast. You know, it's not just about psychology or coaching or the philosophy stuff or the nutrition stuff or the hydration or the sport or the education. It's everything. And it's a lot of the time, it's all the 1% added up, right?
Yeah.
I think I'm just trying to understand how, you know, how did you become so knowledgeable about the mental health stuff? Like, were you having therapy yourself at this time?
Yeah.
You were.
Yeah.
Okay. So you got back into it.
Yeah. I was having therapy, but I was having therapy and also a bit of coaching on the side. But I think I'm quite reactive to things because I'm quite like that. Like if I'm going to do something, I do it, you know? So if someone tells, like I had physio today, I walked in, I'm telling you, whinging about my dodgy right knee, which is my fault. You know, I'm like, he's called Travis. Like, Travis, tell me exactly how you want me to stretch. Like, and then how many times? I'm like, okay, fine. And but what time, Travis?
You're quite intense,
very
and obsessive,
intense.
Almost obsessive about it. You want to get into the detail.
I have to know.
Because you want to, what I'm hearing is that, and particularly from your background, it's like, you want to know that the juice is worth the squeeze. You want to know because you're going to go at it hard and intense. So you want to you want to extrapolate out and know if it's going to work and almost understand the nuts and bolts behind it.
Yeah,
because you know you're going to be
because I know I'm going to go
intense about
I'm going to go.
Yeah.
So therefore, I have to know. I hate the idea of not being at 100-ish%, if that makes sense, because you're kind of like compounding the issue by doing things wrong. But the biggest thing, and I was thinking about this when I was driving to see you, the biggest thing, like, bar all the soft skills stuff that we hear countlessly on things like TikTok and Instagram and YouTube, and I'm not knocking it, your cold water therapies, which I'm a big advocate of. I throw myself in an ice barrel every morning, which is obviously joyous, which is absolutely shit. Like, it's genuinely not nice when you first get in, but it does have benefits, right? I think the biggest thing for mental health, this is subjectively, for me personally, that I've learned, and it might sound really obvious, but I think as men, particularly, we don't do it. It's dealing with big issues in your life head on and not ostriching. So the amount of times things haven't been right and I've just kind of like hid from it a bit, whether it's work things, it could be an investor conversation or anything like that, you know? And if you naturally, the easy thing to do in life, isn't it, is kind of just
squirm away from it.
Squirm away a bit. Just ignore it for a bit. And then a week becomes a month and a month becomes 6 months. And then it always bites you 100% because you haven't dealt with it. But actually that from the day you should have dealt with it up to when it does bite you, the stress load on you is every day and your sleep is affected and your mannerisms are different and your stress levels are different. And I think we could sit here, me and you, in a yoga pose right now with like pure oxygen, with an ice bath afterwards.
A green goddess.
With a green goddess, with just everything. We could do all the tips and tricks out there. But fundamentally, back to our nest conversation, you have to attack and deal with the biggest stress points in your life, right? You have to.
Whatever's creating that tension or that, that discomfort.
You just
or
deal with it.
And what might that look like? Dealing with it,
I think. I mean, I would be lying if I knew how to. All I would say is, like, always remember, look around, you remember on this beautiful planet. And if you're lucky to have amazing friends or beautiful family or kids, right? Have the things that ground you in life. Like look to those guys and remember that a very awkward conversation is nowhere near as important, for instance, as your kids, right? Like try and find
that perspective.
Try and find perspective on everything. And I think like, you know, whether it's the breathing techniques, that's kind of what it does, and meditation, but nothing is more important in this world than happiness and you being happy within yourself. And also, you know, being there for your wife, or your girlfriend, or your kids, or your boyfriend. Like that's the most important thing, right? Screw the deal. Screw anything else, right?
Yeah, there's nothing that gives you perspective quite like that. And I'm guessing what you're saying is that there is all this stuff, but there's nothing more powerful than just going and having that conversation, or like having that tough conversation, or talking about what's getting it out, whether that's friend, family, coach, psychologist. That's a massive one, right?
Yeah, and I think, you know, there's this whole thing about guys having to act tough and, you know, the statistics. I mean, 80% of suicides are men. 80% of suicide are men. I mean, that is nuts. I mean, when I read that recently, and I knew it's the biggest killer of men under 45, but when you know that 80% is men.
It's a crazy statistic.
I mean, but it's not surprising. Because number one, more aggressive. So the horrible statistic is that guys are more likely to actually do it because they do it in much more horrendous, you know, masculine ways, if that makes sense.
But there's a lot of pride and shame around it. A lot of
pride and shame in it. Yeah, and this is a horrible conversation to be having, but I think it's a very important one we should have. But why don't blokes talk, right? Like why? Why don't blokes go and seek help, right? You can have as many tough guys, right? You could have Mayweather mixed with McGregor, mixed with Bruce Lee on a stage being like, guys, go and talk, go to therapy. Blah, blah, blah. The problem is, until that's from grassroots level, embedded into young kids, young boys, it won't change. Because as young lads and young boys, we're told to play with action men and guns and not skip around and not talk about things, if that makes sense. It's totally different. Look at the kind of, I mean, this is a very sexist / ageist comment, but I think it's true. I mean, the tea party thing, you know, little girls that would sit round back when I was growing up and have tea parties. Guys, you just, boys, they're fine. Let's roll around in the mud and attack each other. Like,
not going to have conversations about what you're thinking or feeling about.
And that's where it stems from. It absolutely stems from that. So then you get to teens, and girls mature mentally a lot quicker, physiologically as well. So the girls will deal with issues there. And obviously the self-harming and things that moat in schools is horrendous. There's a lot of those issues. And we could go down that whole rabbit hole of why, but I think it's pretty obvious. You know, is social media genuinely, is it a force for good or is it bad? It's definitely not helping the younger generation because they're not mentally equipped to deal with it. Yeah. But then boys develop the rough age where boys start to develop real issues is around 17, 18 kind of level because it catches up with them a bit. And they're at university and they don't want to tell their mates because they don't think it's cool that something's going on. So I think we can have as much awareness as we want and we can help and we should help people like me and you or people that are in the space, if that makes sense. And we should never stop. But really, we need to think about as early on as possible. That's the kind of...
Makes total sense.
That's the pointy end, I think.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're fixing a problem, not stopping.
So So I want to hear more about Halen Strength. Mm-hmm. Tell me about the inception, because I interjected there when you were just coming onto it. So tell me about the inception of that, where the idea came from, how you built it, and what it is. And then I'll come on to link up what we were just talking about.
So looked at the mental health market and I was like, why is everything super fluffy, very victim-based, like quite feminine? Everything felt quite feminine. Why can't we have something that's slightly more aspirational? Something that's, you don't have to be broken to go and seek help. Like, can't we just even like rebrand the idea of therapy and coaching? And I think coaching's come along a lot. Like, it's got a lot more awareness, but like, when I first started looking at coaching, it was very Tony Robbins. It was either very evangelical right? Like loads of Americans trying to get free keychains and bumper stickers. Or it was like your very high-end singular coach that would be work, and the market was kind of strange, right? But it's definitely becoming more understandable now. Like very simply, and I'm sure your listeners will know this, but the main difference is that therapy will look predominantly more at trauma in the past, if that makes sense, and coaching will look more in the future. Of course they cross, right? I always say this, like Lewis Hamilton's had a really, really bad drive. And when you open up that hood, that's a bad analogy for a racing car driver, but
his hood,
it all connects. Everything connects, but there's a kind of different way of looking at it, different specialities there. So wanted to rebrand coaching and therapy and look at something. And also this was just at the start of COVID. We built the platform really through the first lockdown.
Okay. So hang on, people come onto the platform and it's a matchmaker for you answer some questions and it connects you with the right psychologist or the right coach.
So very simply, like previously before, when I went through the process myself using other platforms, they're either directories, so you find a therapist near me.com kind of thing. And sorry if that is an actual .com, I just made that up. Probably is, right? Probably is. And you just get loads of pixelated images and like, how do you know what's right for you? Like, especially choice. It's just too much choice and it's hard anyway. Like trying to get a guy to speak is hard enough, let alone throw them 1,000 people.
Sure, and a lot of people don't even know if they need a coach or a therapist.
No, no one knows.
And particularly guys, I think it's interesting from the marketing point of view. I think it's easier for people to ask for a coach than a therapist.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and this is actually interesting, which I'll tell you in a bit about Halen and the slight pivot with the business that we're doing. But so we saw this massive issue, and then the rise of TikTok and video content, and how people were just getting used to whether it was a Tinder feel or a TikTok thing, swiping through video content. So that was how we set the platform up. So you download the app, you get asked a few questions, not too much because people are very time poor. And again, they don't really know how they feel. You know, at the end of the day, the most important thing is to get them on the first face-to-face, whether that's through the app, chat with someone. Because we can talk chat GPT all we want, and we can talk, but we're still a long way away from proper human interaction. We are from a therapy coaching standpoint. And this is my slight bugbear with a lot of these apps that come out with too much pre-recorded meditation and tools. Like, I think they're great, but there's a lot of them out there. Mm-hmm. And actually, are they going to really unpick how people are thinking? And I think you need
when it's really specific, it's one-on-one stuff, isn't it? Really?
And because otherwise I feel like, in my own personal experience, you can pick up and drop some of these apps too quickly, if that makes sense. The kind of things that just have a barrage of tools, whether that's sleep stuff or...
Yeah, they're not personal enough. There's not enough accountability.
They will get there.
And I'm guessing that if you've got guys or girls who are even touching your app, there's a need, there's a curiosity there. And so you want to minimize the friction as much as possible so they get in front of someone so they can start immersing themselves in the process and figuring out whether it is right for them. You don't want them to sort of, let's face it, some people might be, some people just might want to be even better at whatever they're doing, but some people might be struggling and they come on there, it's difficult for people to take these steps. So you want to get them there quickly. Really quickly, exactly. So you answer a few questions and the algorithm matches you. We call them pros, Halen pros. They're not coaches, not therapists. Like, we want to call them, you work with a Halen pro, so give it more of a sports feel. Yeah. The algorithm matches you with the pros that have the best links to things you want to work on, not things that are a problem, but whether it's low mood or stress or relationships, these different things. And then it goes into almost like a Tinder style TikTok feel where you can scroll through and hear them talk. So hear them. Oh, interesting. So you can have a look at what your pro might be like. And how they talk and their mannerisms and where they come from and whether they're a man or a little bit like choosing a Peloton coach. You can look through the videos and see, I quite like him or her. I like their vibe. Exactly. And it's so important, isn't it? Like, energy's massive. Like, whether you're
slightly more timid person, you're quite shy, you might want a certain type of energy in someone you speak to. If you're a kind of like 10-pint drinking skinhead guy who needs, everyone's energies are different.
I think that's such a good idea, by the way, because I always encourage people, whether it's a coach, a psychologist, or a personal trainer, go and meet 3, have a free consultation and just talk to them and just who resonates with you. But as you know, Joe, you can speak to someone for the first 30 seconds. And you just know right away. As soon as you walk in the room, they're just not my guy or girl. And so being able to watch the video first, it can accelerate that process.
And what we found, like from a data standpoint, because we've launched 2 years ago, April, it'll be 2 years since we launched. And we found the actual pickup rate from the first session, like that introductory session to main sessions, is like so much better than what we expected it to be for that reason, because they're already warm to that.
You minimize the friction.
Exactly. Yeah. They already feel like they know them. So we launched 2 years ago, and now we're at a really exciting pivot with the business. So when I first looked at it, I looked at focusing just on males, going just for men. But I kind of didn't listen to myself. I'm not saying listen to other people, but I kind of went, let's just go wide. Let's cast a very wide net. And I think albeit, and let's not think about the absolute need for this with men, but there's, with anything you do in life, especially new products, because there are so many new products out there every day. Like niches are good, right? Better to own tiny audience. I'm not saying the male, it's a 50% audience of the world, right? But make it more niche. So we're focusing on men, 17 plus. So we're getting that, looking to help guys at university. Yeah, they're a lot of 40s to 50s where guys start to have wobbles as well. We see a lot there, especially at the moment. And what we're doing is our old pros were incredible, an amazingly talented group of guys and girls. Lots of them had their own businesses as well. They consult with us. It's just that kind of free market term. But at the end of the day, is the product different? Back to like product fit and being differential in the market. And it kind of isn't. Like we can make the front end and reposition it all we want. But I'm a big believer if you kind of trying to own also a bit of IP at the product stage. So what we're doing is we've relaunched, and we use all our pros now are ex-military. So guys and girls, whether that's a fast jet pilot, we've got a born fast jet pilot, we've got a Chinook pilot, we've got a guy that's done 22 years and 22 SAS.
Wow.
We've got 2 women from the intelligence side of things, if that makes sense. And we're super excited by it because now we genuinely feel different, if that makes sense. Like,
already you just explaining that, I can just see how that excites me. I can see it won't resonate with certain people, but certain people will be like, I want a piece of that. Yeah. And you're going super specific. So you're gonna, I'm sure it's working already.
Yeah, it's going so well. And what I've always said is, if we can, and you'll get what I mean by this, take this with a pinch of salt. If we can always trick people that wouldn't conventionally try coaching and therapy to give it a go, right? Because they want to speak to a Chinook pilot or a fast jet pilot or someone that's done 22 years in SAS. And these guys are fully qualified. They've done the military service, and then what's the biggest crisis now to deal with? It's male mental health. It's almost this Avengers feel. They've then got together to come back and help men collectively here in the UK. And if we quickly tackle or address the sexism kind of gender bit around focusing just on men, male mental health right now is the mental health crisis in the UK, right? We're just going to start there. So we're going to focus on what is the biggest crisis, focus on that, and then look to see where else we can go with it, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense.
But you can't do everything. Like males respond, as you know, as a male, to very different things that females respond to. And
it's a huge problem. I don't know if you listened to Claire Milford Haven's interview with me, and she spoke about James, her son, who sadly took his own life, 19 years old, I think. And she has built James's Place, which is incredible suicide prevention clinic for men. And she's doing amazing things. And it is frightening what a big problem it is.
Yeah. And it really is. And it's kind of, I think we're going to start to look at doing more pro bono work at universities, going in and almost doing like outposts for them.
That makes sense. What kind of customers are coming to you? What kind of people should come on there? Is it people that've got serious problems, or they just want to be coached on like how to do better at certain things?
Yeah,
is it a full suite?
It's a really good and very important question. So the first thing is, if anyone's experienced anything severe, whether that's at all suicidal, or very obviously depressed, anything that's severe, like Halen isn't the platform for you. And we signpost them very quickly, for that's Samaritans. So if I'm honest, like our data set right now is still quite small. Mm-hmm. So like what are the traits of our more standard customer, client, user, whatever, how you want to frame it. The data set isn't big enough, but we're seeing the common traits of things like stress, a lot of confidence, a lot of sleep, actually. A lot of people coming to us because they're now, I think because of the awareness of what bad sleep is an indicator of, they're coming to us to then figure out what's causing them the bad sleep,
Got it.
But yeah, lots of stress. I mean, COVID threw up a huge amount of, I don't quite know what to do with my life anymore. Like, oh my God, that was everywhere, right? I mean, I didn't see that at all because I was just absolutely working on it. But a lot of people that we know, I mean, we saw a lot of, between me and my partner, between our slightly wide friendship groups, relationships were tested, weren't they? Homeschooling.
I think everything was tested.
Everything
was
work,
tested, relationships, family.
Yeah, it's interesting.
It put the squeeze on everything, didn't it? So it either made you stronger or pulled you apart, whether in all elements of your life.
And back to you never stop working on yourself. So at that point in my life, I was super happy, super focused. We're talking about lockdown and the difference to different people, how different people felt it. But I was in an amazing place, right? Because I was so energized with Halen, right? It's the origins of it, if that makes sense. Just getting up, I was a nightmare.
Remind me what Halen actually means.
Old English for hero. It's Old English for hero. So someone that fights and gets back up and gets back up and gets
Got it. So there's that link between the military.
Yeah, and pushes and pushes and pushes. But back to the kind of the macro things that I would say are the big major things you should work on. One is, of course, address anything that's an issue. Like you need to address it. The other one would be, it's a very obvious thing, but without goals, without any kind of goal, you're screwed, really, right? You are, because you just float. You float through.
Don't have a purpose.
You don't have a purpose. And I think if you meet these people that are anti-goal, and no, I don't want to, I don't want to live that way because it's conforming to this kind of idea that you should get from there to there.
It's a bit of it. I mean, goal is almost a stigmatized word on its own, isn't it?
Exactly.
It's like, hoorah, we got to have big goals. And some people don't like that, but it's more, you can use other words.
But I would say to the people that do like outrightly hit the idea of trying to progress, if that makes sense, in self-development, that by trying not to progress, they're progressing in being like static, if that makes sense. Like they kind of get a kick out of that. And I don't know. I just think as humans, you need to push forward. You need to walk forward. Yeah, of course, we need to sit and be still, but you need to walk a bit, right? And I think without that, everything can become quite monotonous. Honestly, the goals one, people know, right? They do know. And actually on the goals one, it's not just about getting fitter or it's not about drinking less. Like try and set something that's so big that backs that, right? So if you're trying to stop drinking and you've been 3 weeks in Jan and someone goes, let's just have a proper boozy lunch in the pub. Let's just do it. And you've deserved it, right? 'Cause it's been 3 weeks. So easy to fall off the wagon, like we all have. If the idea is just that you should have stopped drinking. But if your idea is to stop drinking because you genuinely want to be a better dad to your kid, or you're bored of your business just going okay, you look around these other people and you see them smashing out the ballpark again. Like you need a bigger reason behind it, otherwise it won't work. Right.
It's linking it to a meaning.
Linking it to a bigger meaning.
And is that something the pros would help you, create and hold you accountable?
Yeah, I think so because like finding meaning isn't easy. Lots of people don't know what they want. Like
it's a big thing.
It's a big thing. It's a big thing, and you need to.
A lot of people don't know what they want to do, or they're looking for their purpose.
No, exactly. And I think sometimes you need to put the handbrake on and look at your life and assess what you want to improve, what's working really well, and what isn't working well, and then almost formalize a plan. And I'm a big believer in testing as well, testing and adjusting. So try different things, like just really try it, like hack the hell out of yourself. Okay. Now this is going slightly one down from the macro, but this is almost the fun bit. The macro bit, you should just deal with the big problems, decide on what you really want to develop, put a big meaning behind it. But the hacking bit I find really interesting from a self-development standpoint. So if you're going to try things like meditation, right, or things like ice bathing, or things like cold water showering, right? Or your sleep. Really mix it up. Like, use yourself as a guinea pig. So try for a week and literally test this stuff. Try for a week, like ice bathing first thing. So my current routine is I walk out in the morning, don't look at my phone, it's on airplane mode. That usual bullshit, which everyone talks about, but it kind of works. Don't go anywhere near the Daily Mail. Don't go anywhere near anything, right? Try to avoid the WhatsApp messages that pop up when you turn it off because you're trying to get on a podcast or something, right? But just don't look at your phone. Walk outside straight away, straight in the ice bath, because it's just not enjoyable. And if you can tackle that first thing, fine. We will hear the psychology of why that's good. But try lunch, because here's the thing. I've done mornings, and I've done lunchtimes. Mornings are kind of cool because I feel a bit more like a Viking, because I feel like I've just like nailed the day, right? But it's not beautiful. Whereas if I try and get in the ice, when I get in the ice bath at lunchtime and it's not pissing down, like if we have a slightly good weather and I'm sat there looking up at the sky and listening to the birds go and everything, it's a much more enjoyable process, like what that does to the body, what that does to the mind. So my point is just try all these different tips and tricks of things at different times as well.
It makes so much
sense.
sense.
Makes sense.
No, it makes a lot of sense. I had Ben, my producer, in here last week, and we have a bit of a timeout session between the episodes, and we sort of dig into some of the stuff, and we were talking about life coaching, and he was like, do I really have to? He was referring to all the 5 a.m. club and the ice bath stuff, and he's like, I'm almost made to feel like unless I do this stuff, I'm not going to be, winning or successful, and we spoke about it, and the advice I gave him was very similar to you, Joe. It's like you gotta sort of let it all come in and try lots of things and see what works for you. It's so personal, right? It's
so personal. And we're also, if you have a family or if you have a girlfriend or a wife, you're a unit. So you can be quite selfish with this stuff if you listen to too many people. Like Goggins is epic, right? I'm a big fan of him, right? I think he's great. But, the Goggins routine of up at 5, the 5 a.m. club style, bit of stretching, maybe cold water bath, straight out for a 2-hour run, straight in the gym. Like, I've got an 11-year-old. The minute I try and creep down the stairs at like 5, he's like, Daddy, and I'm screwed. I can't go and do anything with him. So like, again, there's more important things than kind of trying to put yourself on a podium for doing some of these tips and tricks versus just fitting it in and fitting it around how your partner lives as well. My fiance, very well, is a proper night out. So I can't do a 5 a.m. club because I'll be going to sleep at 2 a.m.
Yeah, it's got to work for the unit. It makes. But
that's the cool
sense.
bit. But trying to find that that's the bit I think is really cool. Finding your own blueprint.
Trying lots of things, but then deliberately being the architect of that to fit in with what's important to you and priorities, and not listening to the noise too much.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you. A lot of times when people create these sort of businesses, they are almost sort of creating the ideal product for themselves, or creating what would have solved their own problem, right? So would you say that you are a classic, your type of avatar would be, your typical customer, someone like you, Joe, someone that, not necessarily like super down in the dumps. We all have our wobbles from time to time, but you're a fit guy, you're an ambitious guy, and you just want a bit more coaching and accountability and people to, spend a bit of time, carve out some time in your day to just go in and get organized with some of this stuff and then go out and get back out there. So do you think that that's a fair thing to say?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think like when I like something, I become the biggest advocate for it. Like I really, really, well, that's like brands. Like I really do like to talk to other people about things that I'm doing. Not the no drinking thing or the ice bath thing, because then you just become one of those people, right? But like if I like a product, I'll tell people about it. And I think when it comes to things like Halen, a big part of what I try to look at is what can get guys to tell someone else about it. And that's where I think but that's why we're so excited by the military angle of your coach is an ex-fast jet pilot, or this guy flew Chinooks for years, or this guy was in the SAS. If we can create a little bit of bragging rights, right?
There's gravitas to that.
A little bit of gravitas, a little bit of bragging rights that I would sit in a coffee shop or down the pub with you, Charlie, and I might say, check out, by the way, I'm working with this fast jet pilot. He flew Tornadoes for 18 years and he's just helping me with loads of shit. Like, that's a completely different conversation for a guy than I'm working with a therapist right now. It's completely different.
And I think there can be a lot of judgment as well with, say, I think therapists and psychologists is a little bit different because you need specific qualifications. But particularly for coaches and life coaches, there's a lot of people that aren't really accredited or certified. And I think that a lot of people might have a life coach. I've certainly had a life coach before where I'm like, maybe they needed the life coach.
Exactly.
But I can imagine, an elite fighter pilot, military, special forces. I mean, that has kudos, credibility behind it. Okay, that has to translate into being a good teacher, educator, coach, etc. But I can certainly see that.
Exactly. And that's the vetting process. We're not saying that anyone that's ever served can become a Halen Pro, because they have to absolutely have left. We like them to have had a lot of life experience in between their military career and going down the kind of professional development route, personal development route as well. But it's nice to speak to someone. Sometimes I think we spoke about this, I think, when we first met. But sometimes, especially in the coaching world, I think, and actually in the therapy world, the fundamentals, me and you know that a lot of people that get into the space, whether that's therapy or counselling, tend to have been through their own stuff. But I don't think that's really portrayed that well and that often. And I think something that Halen does, and we're very clear about doing, is every single one of our pros is very open to say the things they've been through themselves.
Their story, because then that can provide relatability and context.
Yeah, massively, because what we don't want is just this ex-SAS guy stood there talking about how he knows how to get his mindset and his sleep better. No, what we want as a business is someone that's been through the mill themselves, worked their way through it, okay, then fell in love with the space, if that makes sense, and then wants to go back and help others. That's so much more powerful for me than someone that's just studied at university and gone into teaching it.
No, it makes total sense. I just want to change track a little bit and just go back to talking about this relationship with your experience when your father died when you were very, very young. And you spoke about that with hindsight, retrospect, when you were at the beginning of the story, about how that affected you. And maybe that was a reason why I had here Daily Mail magazine. You said the more extreme, the better you were looking for. And, you made that link between, what happened with your dad early on. Going through your life, how have you learned to deal with that? Is that still in you, or through working with therapists and self-awareness, has that become easier, or do you still have that in you?
So I think, it never really goes away. It was serious trauma that for me, and I think for anyone that's ever faced or dealt with a family member or a friend with that severe, it's kind of such an anomaly, right? He was completely normal, loving, successful dad. And then within 6 months, we didn't really know who he was. It's really quite aggressive. And it's quite rare if you think about it, that kind of the way that works. No, I never ever, I never cried over it. I think I cried once at the funeral when we put him in the ground and everyone walked off and my mum's friend put her hand on my shoulder and just went, "Are you okay?" And I just lost it, right? Absolutely lost it. So all this pent up. I don't even think when mum told me, like, I cried. I didn't really I didn't deal with it. And I've probably cried 3 or 4 times since that point over him. Normally when I've been absolutely exhausted and knackered. And sometimes the byproduct of, in the midst of an argument, like I've just been and it's gone, poof, I'll come out. Yeah. And I think, to kind of answer your question, I've learned to talk about it more through therapy, through relationships, if that makes sense. I talk about it a lot with my partner. And again, to like give you the realities of it, it's also quite a scary thing, but you can't really test for this thing. And his mother died from it as well. So it's genetic. They say it's carried through the female gene, or they say it is carried through the female gene. So I'm pretty good, but so it's
a little bit scary.
It's a scary conversation.
But is that, that thing that was driving you to, into all these extreme things? Do you still have that? Do you think that's still part of what drives you to, be intense and obsessive about things and want to push things to the limit?
No, absolutely. And what I've actually learned to do and work on myself is realize that everyone else isn't like that. Like some people are like that, like you're driven to what you do, but just because I wake up in the morning and I'm feeling great, I can't expect everyone else to be like, "Come on, let's go.
Hoorah.
Let's go." Yeah, well, let's slightly less hoorah, but you know what I mean? And I do, the main thing I need to work on myself is literally learn just to be still. And I think, again, back to the tip stuff, the biggest change with me has just been I wake up early and I do my meditation. And my meditation, I sit there by myself breathing, with some cool music.
Again, you found what works for you.
I found what works for me, and it really, really works for the way my mind is. Because without that, I'm just like, I just go. So I need that stillness, and that really, really works for me. But no, I mean, I buggered my knee because I tried to become an ultra runner overnight, right? And I've knackered it.
I was asking about you and your father because I think that's just interesting, like how you dealt with that going forward, and how you explained it. But clearly that had an impact on you and your life, right? We all know that certain experiences from our childhood and when we're growing up, that they stay with us, and that has an effect on us psychologically, and that informs decision making and our behavior, etc. Tell me about your brother and sister.
They're amazing.
Were they impacted in similar ways?
Yeah, I mean, number one, they're amazing. And I just want a massive shout out to my whole family because they're epic. My mum's just bloody hell what she's gone through, honestly. And like even the period of my life from when I left home after dad to I was a useless younger son, like zero communication. So she's the most amazing woman. But yeah, it affected everyone. My brother was at uni. He was away. He was more grown up. He's 4 years older than me. And I think just that difference of me being at home and it wasn't harder on me. It's hard on everyone, but I wasn't as developed as he was. It affected my sister. I think, guys can just close down their feelings and go and jump on my mountain bike and go and join the Royal Marines. And it's different for people that are more in touch with their emotions, and rightly so. They think through things. But yeah, I had a really loving family, really, really loving family. And they're amazing now.
Sounds like he would be extremely proud of you if he was still around, Joe.
Yeah, thanks, mate. But
So going forward, I mean, we know about Halen, we know about the ultra running, and that's exciting. What else is there for you? What are you after? What are your goals? What are you striving towards?
I mean, absolutely Halen. Like, if I'm honest, like we said, like Halen is we've launched it. It's live. We're pivoting, all right, with the new strategy, male only, using its military. But there's so much to do there. There's so much to do, and what I want to do is, be sat there and see 2 proper gruff lads or blokes saying, "Oh, have you heard about this Halen thing?" Like, job done, right? It's a big thing to achieve, right? It's a really, really big thing to achieve. And I think, like, I'm not doing this for money. Like, I paid myself in years. You know, my fiance's had to pick up the bills countless times, forever. No. But that's the drive. It's really make it work. And also, I think in a day and age in business where everything's like heavily funded from venture capital to, I quite like to be the company that literally like gruffed it and made it work. You know, that makes sense. Because it's not easy. You know, running business isn't easy. It really isn't easy. And I think, and actually the kind of irony of even running a mental health business can really make your mental health suffer. Like, it's hard. Like last year with Halen was really tricky. You know, we're doing another raise.
So hang on, you're self-funding it or you're raising money?
Initially self-funded and then raised with some investors, got some amazing investors on board, and then needed to raise again. And Russia, Ukraine, pandemic. No, pandemic was mental health more aware, but just capital becoming harder to acquire, right? And just people wanting to take less risk, and rightly so. Like valuations going
harder to raise money as well.
Harder to raise money, really harder to raise money, which is the irony because it's a bigger issue because of mental health, because of people suffering, if that makes sense.
It does, a bigger problem to solve.
Bigger problem to solve. And it's been tricky. You know, I think people think that when you run these companies, you need to be like Jay Shetty and you need to have these Instagram profiles. And actually over the last 6 months, I haven't hid away from that, if that makes sense, but I've just really focused on the fundamentals of the business and not felt the need to go out there and become this kind of living, breathing, walking, talking version of Halen, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense, Joe, and I think it's really important to stick to your guns. I mean, you being a branding marketing guy, you know how important marketing is, etc. But you know, Jay Shetty's great for Jay Shetty people, but you're going to be great, and your brand's going to be great for your people. Yeah. And so I think you know, stick to your guns. I think I think it's really exciting, and I think it's really clever to go for this niche, and you know, it's congruent with you and your background and the military side of things. Just so people listening, because I can just imagine that people will be interested in this. So how can they find out about it? How much does it cost? Just give me some of the nuts and bolts of it.
Yeah. So App Store, it's Halen. Just go on, just type in Halen, you'll see it. The website is halenstrength.com. So halenstrength.com. So you download the app and like we said, you answer a few questions and your first session is £10. Now, we over the course of 2 years, we actually tried making that first consultation free. But what we found is we had a monumental amount of no-shows because when you have no, and I've personally done this with appointments, right? If you haven't slightly prepaid for something, commitment, stresses, work meeting, gym, whatever, beer, pint, you quite quickly can cancel it. But if you've already prepaid slightly, so £10 for the first session, which is 30 minutes, you can meet the pro, get to know them. They can have, and that first session isn't there won't be therapy or coaching within that session, but it's as much for them to tell you how they work. And then from there, you can book bundles of sessions or pay as you go. And it comes down to around £75 a session. A session, yeah.
For about, what was that, an hour? Or?
An hour-long session. And that is it right now on the app. When I say that is it, there's this Simpsons episode where Homer Simpson, I've never seen it, but someone told me about it, and I thought it's a very good metaphor analogy of what I don't like that companies do. He basically, I think he launches this car, brings out a car, and it's got everything on it, like all the bells and the whistles, and it just doesn't work, right? It's just a piece of shit. And I think sometimes in this world where everyone's looking for scalability in tech and businesses, people actually don't, they almost forget about the most beneficial way of doing it, if that makes sense.
Okay,
and looking for just scale. And I want to say that. So through the app at the moment, there isn't any in-app content. You simply can book with the pros and, have sessions with the pros, and that's it. We're going to work into different products or work into more of a subscription business, where that's pre-recorded with the pros. But I'm just a big believer in keep it simple initially, like do it properly.
Proof of concept, really add value to those people.
Yeah. And then collectively with the customers or the clients or the users, however you want to use the terminology, develop what they need, right? With them, like do it with them. And I think the app markets are so bad for just like overnight churning, just appville, just too much everything. And it's just, wait a minute, let's just simplify. Let's just simplify everything.
I love that. I think it's such a good idea.
You know?
Joe, this has been a great conversation. Thank you. Just before we finish, are there any other, I mean, obviously the most important thing is Halen Strength and encourage as many people as possible to check it out.
Mm-hmm.
But just along your own journey, any tips, tricks, recommendations, books, podcasts? You can't recommend the Charlie Law podcast.
Yeah, I am right now.
But are there any, things that have really helped you along the way? Any sort of thought leaders or books or stuff that you did along the way that really will stay away from or really helped?
There's one I love. There's a book I love, and I read it. I'm constantly reading it, if I'm honest. It's and I'm not going to be able to get the title right, but I'm sure your listeners will probably know it. It's something like don't sweat the big stuff, or don't sweat the small. And it's literally almost like a toilet book, and every page is one thing. It's like 1 to 100, right? And it's just it's brilliantly written. And this thing sold millions, and I can't remember the title. So
we'll dig it out and put it in the show notes.
Yeah, please do, because it's like, for me, like, you can end the day like in bed. For me personally, my fiance would be going down horrendous TikTok holes watching animals, and I just don't go near that stuff. And I can sit there, and it's so positive and so easily digested that it's just a beautiful, beautiful book, and just written. And I genuinely practiced a lot of the things I've read in this book. I've practiced. I've been reading it probably nonstop for like 2 years.
Is that because it's easy tiny to refer to? Each different page is a different message.
Every page, but it's really, really good shit. Like genuinely good shit. It's not like be grounded, look at the sun. It's like genuinely good shit. Like, I won't go into it. I'll let your readers look.
No, we'll put it in the show notes. Yeah, but someone like you who's clearly tried, like we were saying earlier, you've tried a lot of things. You've discarded the stuff that doesn't work. You've kept what does. So if you're recommending, the one book that is the big standout one for you, then I'm going to check it out.
Yeah, honestly. And what else would I say? And I don't care how cheesy this sounds, because I used to kill lots of people for a living, so therefore I can't necessarily sound that cheesy and being nice. As much as possible, and I say that back to, you must do things every day, follow the rules. No, as much as possible, do something nice for someone every day, because it's a selfish thing, because you feel so fucking good for it. Like, you genuinely do. Like, if you could do something so nice and really enjoy it. I mean, it's quite cheesy. It can be a bit like Richard Curtis, About Time, like appreciating the moments, all that stuff. But from my own selfish, subjective standpoint, I feel so good for it, where you say good morning for people, you open the door, or you really take time with people. Like, that's better than 10 ice baths. To see someone, to do something kind, random acts of kindness is really, really important in this world, because if everyone does it, we're in a better place.
Massively underrated, isn't it?
Massively underrated. Yeah. And it's such a simple, cool thing to do.
It's such a good reminder.
You don't think?
100%. What a great place to end. Joe, thanks a million for coming and doing this. It was a great conversation. I think people get a lot from it, and wish you all the best in your professional, personal endeavors, and look forward to seeing big things from Halen Strength.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks for having me on.
Cheers, Joe.